So back before I was doing YouTube, I used to run workshops like 20 times a year. These days, I only do 3 or 4. So I held a private workshop a few months ago, and the team wanted to record this one to share with you guys as well. We've actually edited this video to be interactive so that you guys can actually follow along later as well. So here's the workshop. Hope you enjoy.
So the first thing that I want to start with is some of the basic principles around how to learn fast, how to learn anything very fast. No matter what you're learning, no matter what situation you're in, no matter what type of content, whatever type of challenge you have, there are certain principles that have to be met. If you don't meet these principles, you will find learning hard every single time. So this becomes your North Star. Any strategy or technique that you learn or use for the rest of your life has to meet this North Star, otherwise you will struggle. So I'm going to give you a little bit of theory, just enough to kind of wrap your head around it, and then I want to swing back and forth, having some discussion, and then I'll go through some more tactical strategies afterwards. The first thing I'm going to anchor on is that flow of information that I talked about before, where you just have data, and that data can come from any type of source, and this is going inside your brain, and your brain is doing stuff with it. It's thinking about it, right? And that thinking, we're going to call that processing. And depending on how well you process that information, you are either going to have a really good memory, it's going to be sticky, you will retain that information, or if you process it in a bad way, you will forget it. Likewise with how deep your learning is. If you process it in a good way, you will not only remember, but you can use that information in the way that you need to. So if this is good, then this means strong memory, okay, and then great depth of understanding and great ability to apply that information. If you do this poorly, most of the time it just ends up in the bin. This is when you forget everything that you learn. You read through a page, halfway through the page you realize you don't actually remember anything that you've been learning. You spend hours and hours learning, and then 1 or 2 weeks later you realize you've forgotten half of it. That's what happens. And this is just a symptom. You don't control this. You don't control your memory. You don't control your depth. You can try to remember something. It doesn't matter. Trying to remember something doesn't mean you can remember it. Otherwise, this room would be empty. No one would have any problems with anything ever. Likewise with depth. Trying to understand something deeply doesn't change anything, right? All of this, these are symptoms purely of the process that we use. And when you use the right process, you can't avoid it. You can try to forget it, but if you're using the right process, you won't be able to. It will be sticky. So obviously the question is, so what is the right type of processing that we need to do? I want you to remember this for when you're learning. Information in isolation is death. Information in isolation is death. When you get any new piece of data coming into your brain, and anytime your brain is trying to figure out what to do with that information, whether it should hold on to it or not, it is making a decision. Is it worth keeping on to this information? Most of the time, it is no. Right? What's the 6th license plate you saw today? That is data. That was sensory information that went into your brain, and your brain filtered through it and forgot it so fast, you don't even remember even having had it in your brain before. The overwhelming majority of data that goes into your brain will be lost. Because if it doesn't lose that information, your brain is just going to be processing nonstop. The energy consumption of that is going to be massive, and that's a life or death situation. So your brain is extremely, extremely efficient at pruning information that it doesn't need. And only the stuff that meets multiple filters of being worth keeping will it be stored. Now, here's the problem, right? Remember how I said that you can't just will your way into having better memory. So if you read something and you think, oh, this is really important, I need to know this for an exam, for my job, for solving this particular problem, and you say, okay, I need to try to remember this really hard. From your brain's perspective, it doesn't care. It doesn't care. It doesn't care that you need it for an exam, because the alternative is that you will just die. Right? Would you rather die or remember something for a meaningless exam? So most information that comes into our brain, especially in the modern day, is extremely dense and largely irrelevant from our brain's perspective. And so what we're trying to do is we're saying, I need you to recognize that this is worth keeping. And the way we do that is by preventing isolation. we say, hey, you need to hold on to this piece of information because it's not just this piece of information. This information relates to this, and this, and this, and this. And so if you forget this, the implication is catastrophic. So we have to trick our brain into seeing every piece of information as a connected web or a connected pattern. Everything has an implication. Everything has a consequence. Everything influences everything else. And by actively processing information that creates those connections, automatically you will have better memory. Okay? So, quick question. Roughly how many hours did I study a day when I was trying to enter into medical school?
22.
Yeah. What was the type of mint that I used to rub on my eyes? Yeah. So, you know, that's a very isolated small piece of information, right? That's a very isolated, fragmented piece of data that actually has no meaning to you in your life. Like, it could be a Smith, it could be a Hershey's Kiss, like no one cares, right? But you remember that. You remember that involuntarily. If I ask you about your favorite movie that you've watched, you know, you watch a movie, you love it, and then afterwards I say, what was it about? And you say, I don't remember anything. Something is wrong with you, right? You remember that. Whether you want to or not, that will be retained because when that information comes in, it's being connected. The story is connecting it, whatever is connecting it, right? And that's actually a process that we can control. We can deliberately create a connection in such a way that previously irrelevant information becomes relevant, right? So a common example is like a phone number. So if you have a phone number, let's say that the phone number is, I don't remember how the Australian phone number starts, so I'm going to use a New Zealand phone number. So it starts with 021067934. Please don't call this number. I don't know whose it is. I'm sure it's be nice if you're going to call them. So this is just a series of numbers, right? And if this was your phone number, then normally the way that you remember it is like this. It's like da 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 da. Like you create like a pattern. You create a rhythm to it. And then have you ever had that situation where you say what your number is to someone and they say it back to you, but then they use a different pattern and you're like, wait, like, yeah, that is correct. Yep. So that's your brain having found a way to organize that information in a certain type of structure and a pattern where this has become relevant not through any intrinsic meaning, but actually simply just because it's associated with a pattern. So that's a very simple example, right? But you know, this goes up in levels, and we're going to explore those different levels together. The next thing I want to move on to is the snowball effect and how everything I've talked about right now relates to the snowball effect. How many of you, if I say the word flow, entering into flow, do you understand what that means? What that feels like? It's when things are locking in. How many of you have experienced flow when it comes to learning something? You're learning something and you just feel like, ooh, I get it. It's making sense. Things are coming together, the concepts are building. Actually, it feels good because you can feel like, ooh, I'm learning, like I'm gaining knowledge. You're usually pretty confident about that knowledge as well. You feel like it's all coming together. It feels very productive. So that flow state that you're reaching, that's one symptom of having this snowball effect. This is what's actually happening. Your brain has a series of connections and patterns based on all of your prior knowledge, all of your prior experiences, everything that you've ever learned before, not just related to like work or academics, anything from your hobbies, favorite books, whatever it is. So let's just say that this is your existing pattern. So we call this a schema. This network of information, we call it a schema. So your brain is an existing schema. And then new information that you read from a book or you're listening to right now doesn't come in a schema. It comes as isolated, individual dots and points of information. And it's up to you to figure out what the schema is. A schema exists. When you read a textbook, the author has a schema. They're trying to communicate that schema to you. They're trying to make you see it the way that they see it. When you are first learning about, like a new complicated piece of legislature, for example, the person who created that legislature had a big picture understanding, well, hopefully, had a big picture understanding of all the ramifications, of it and what it really means. So your job is not to just collect the data. This is not your job, right? Your job is to actually figure out what the pattern and the schema is here. When you figure that out, that is when you really truly understand it. That's when it clicks and you understand it and it feels intuitive and logical. And so when this first piece of information comes into your brain is trying to see, how is this thing related to what I already know? what are the possible connections? And it's hypothesizing, and it's looking for all of those things. And so let's say that it finds, oh yeah, this thing could be related to this, and it could be related to this. Great, so now we're consolidating this new piece of information in our schema. That knowledge is slowly becoming our own. We get a second piece of information, it'll do the same thing. Let's say it can't find it. This information will be lost. If you didn't see how it connects together, you're going to forget that. So let's say we come back to this. We've got our third piece here. So, okay, this third piece kind of connects to this one, but it also connects to this one. So you see now the new piece of information that we just learned, because this is now connected, this becomes another anchor point for this one to connect with. So as you learn more, now that we've got this connected, we see, oh, this is actually connected to that one. Oh, now that I see that these two are connected, actually this is kind of a bigger group of information which widely connects to this one. So if this is connecting here, shouldn't there also be something here? You look through the textbook, you look through whatever it is, you ask on YouTube, oh, there actually is something there. And not only is there one, there's also this one here which relates to that as well. So you can see now the network is growing. And so as we learn more, there are more places that this information can connect to. Whereas when we first start, you don't have many anchor points. You don't have much leverage. So that new information, there are only limited places for it to fill. So snowballing is when you start with not much, you start creating a few initial connections, and then as you continue to move through, it gets easier and easier to build new connections because your brain is actually a better version of itself than it was 15 minutes ago. There's more opportunities. So the strategies that I'm going to go through are about creating the snowball effect. So you've got paper in front of you, right?
Hey, so we're about to enter into the strategies now, and we've edited this video so you can follow along. So I recommend you go grab yourself some paper, or ideally a tablet with infinite canvas. If you follow along, then the feedback that I give to them is almost like I'm giving it to you, so it's going to make it much more useful and relevant. And speaking of following along, learning to learn is just easier when there's something to follow step by step. Which is why, for some of you, it might be worth thinking about whether my full guided program is a good fit for you. Note, this is a paid program, so it's not going to be for everyone, but it does make learning to learn a lot more straightforward. I tell you exactly how to build an entire learning system from start to finish to improve your memory and your performance. The idea is to prevent you from wasting time on just trying to figure out what to do next and whether you're doing it right. But again, it's not for everyone. It is suitable for students and professionals. Our member split is about 50-50, but it does take effort and diligence and at least a few hours per week. It's not an overnight solution, so if you've got an exam coming up next week, it's probably not going to help you that quickly. Also, if you don't have anything really serious to learn, like you're not dealing with dense new information or you don't have to perform with that information at a high level, this program is probably going to be overkill. But if you are interested and you want to learn a little bit more, I'll leave a link for you in the description below. So hopefully now you've got your paper or your tablet in front of you, and we're going to jump into the interactive strategies part.
So what I want to do is we're going to go through a very, very simple exercise. I want you to think about something that you are learning or have learned that you want to recap on, and write down 15 keywords of that topic. It could be any type of problem you're trying to solve. It could be a project you're working on. It could be a topic that you've previously studied that you're trying to reapply, brand new thing that you're learning. One thing that I will say, try not to use languages. That's because language learning has kind of its own separate stuff, which we're just not going to go into in this workshop. If you want to, you can also just go to ChatGPT and be like, hey, this is the topic, give me 20 keywords, and just pick from the list. It doesn't matter, we just need to get to a list of keywords. Feel free. That's totally acceptable. So what we're going to do right now is a simple activity that I call blind mapping. And the good thing about this is that not only is it a great first technique to start trying to expose yourself to how to forcibly make connections, but it's also a technique that you can just use. You can just use this every single day, anytime that you need to learn anything. This is a great first step. You can then take this technique and you can build on it. You can make it much more advanced and sophisticated. But today I want to at least give you this initial technique. If you use this technique correctly, you can learn 200-300 pages of information in like 2 hours. And you will remember like 80 to 90% of that for weeks, and you will be able to answer questions about it. You will be able to talk about it. You will be able to discuss it, work with those ideas in complex ways. And it will feel fun and engaging. And I literally just did that on the plane here with a book.
I read that quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so the way that we do this is that you simply just pick a word from that list. You don't have to know, like, you have to be confident about it. You literally just pick a word that you feel like this word seems kind of important, right? So find that word, put a little tick next to it. Now, I want you to look down the list and then ask yourself, when you say this word is important, you've already actually made a judgment here. You've said this is important and already screened through possible relationships and implications and consequences, right? Things don't become important in isolation. Importance is only given in its relation to other items. So you've made the judgment, hey, this word seems important. So I want you to look through the rest of that list and then tick the thing that it influences, the consequences of it, the things that it's related to that give it its importance. And you might look at your list and realize, actually, I don't have any words for it. That means you've missed some keywords. So fill it in. Write down more keywords that tell you why that word was important. So right now, we have a list of words. We've got a tick next to one of them. We've got a tick next to a few other ones because that forms a little web. So all we're going to do is we're going to make that web visible. You already know that they're connected in a certain way. It's in your mind. Just try to put it down on paper. Don't use any extra words. Don't write in sentences. No bullet points. Simply keyword, line, arrow to another one, line, arrow to another one, in a simple, very basic map. Now, I want us to go back to that keyword list. Some of those items are not ticked. So look at the little map that you've got, the little connections, and ask yourself, what is the other item from this list that you think might be meaningfully connected to what you've already got? So we've built a small little schema, and we're going to just extend one step out from that. Bring one more keyword into the fold and see how it would connect together, and then just make whatever links you need to connect it up. We've kind of started this cycle again. By adding that new keyword in, it's sort of opened the door for some new connections to be formed. So now when you look at your keyword list again, you might see, okay, now that there's this new keyword that's been added in, a couple other ones feel like they naturally might be able to follow along. So we're going to do that one more time. Find maybe 2 or 3 keywords from your list that you think are meaningfully connected to the keyword that you had, and then again, add them to your map. And then now your map should be starting to get a little bit bigger, a little bit messier, a little bit harder to follow, but the connections are at least drawn on there. And that's what you want. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Don't worry about getting the most accurate answer. Just write your ideas down, thoughts, hypotheses. No one's going to judge you on how accurate this is. So right now, you should have a map that looks kind of messy. There's lots of things going around. Your lines are probably crossing, so put your hands up if your lines are kind of crossing each other, arrows crossing over other arrows. Okay, it looks a little bit like there's lots going on. You should look at this and feel like, okay, technically the connections are there, but it's definitely not staying in my memory for very long. That's how you should feel about it, looking at it right now. So what we're going to do is now we're going to consolidate. We're going to simplify. So take that. You might need a brand new piece of paper, or you want a fresh sheet. So you've got the connections technically there, but it's a little too messy. So what I want you to do is I want you to redraw those connections, but arrange them in a way so that the lines aren't really crossing so much anymore. It sort of represents more of a flow that makes sense to those types of connections. And the other part is I want you to see if you can group some of those together. You might realize that 2 things are connected because they're kind of part of the same group of information. So any way you can find a way to group keywords together, group them. And if you're feeling like, okay, this is moving ahead pretty easily, add more keywords on. Feel free to just keep that cycle going. Right? Keep trying to map it out, show those connections, show those directions, just make them a bit more purposeful. If you notice that you've got one item and then lots of arrows coming out from one item, then see if you can group those. So instead of one item with 6 things coming off of it, it might be one item with 2 groups of things coming out off of it. See how you can group things together to clean it up. If you feel like you're able to, you might also want to make the arrows more explicit. Make the direction explicit. Is it going from left to right? Or is it going from top to bottom? Create a direction to the arrow. What is the nature of that relationship? Are there any relationships that are even stronger than others? Make that line thicker. Really prioritize which major connections really form the foundation of this topic. Okay, we're going to pause there for a second, and I'm just going to get a sense of how it is. So, a few things. First of all, I like to do this little scale. So thumbs either here or here. So this side or that side. So you're on this side if you felt like this is really, really easy, very, very little effort, you're almost falling asleep how easy it is. And then over here, this is when you're like, oh, I'm having to actually really think. Like I'm very active mentally. That's almost to the point where it's like I'm getting kind of overwhelmed with all the different things that I'm possibly thinking about here. How are we feeling? Show me in the room. Can you point it towards me so I get a sense of the direction?
Which direction do you want to
So this is easy. This side of the room is easy. Okay. This side of the room is hard, very cognitive challenging. Put them up high so I can actually clearly see where we're at. Okay. Good. So that feedback is actually very, very important to me because that is actually one of the key indicators whether you're doing this correctly or not. You should not be here. You could be here, but hopefully you're somewhere around here, right? That's what we want because that is a sign that your brain is working. That is your brain learning. Some of you may have even felt, did any of you feel like you were actually kind of able to enter into this sort of flow where you're sort of thinking about these ideas back and forth and there's lots of, it is very back and forth. You're not necessarily consuming more information, but you can feel the thoughts are starting to organize themselves differently. You're challenging them in different ways. Did you feel that? At the beginning, it can feel quite chaotic compared to how you might normally learn something. So these are all good. And one of the most important things to do as a learner is that you have to recognize that that is the feeling you want. One of the most common reasons why people struggle to learn effectively is that they will feel that feeling that is associated with having to think a lot, going back and forth, and they think, oh, this is bad. Like this is me being overwhelmed, I'm not doing it correctly, and then they pick something that's easier, right? They pick something that's easier. So if you just chuck these keywords into ChatGPT and say, hey, group them for me, it will do that in seconds. It takes very little effort, but none of that is in your brain. So you have not developed expertise, right? So the heavy lifting of your brain is what creates the expertise. That's what creates the memory and the knowledge. So you want to be in this band where you feel your brain is really active. You're constantly going back and forth. A couple of things. First of all, this map that you've created is just a representation of your thoughts. It's not meant for accuracy. It doesn't have to be accurate. It's just helping you think. It's a tool to help you learn. You might draw a connection there and you have no idea if that's truly correct or not. You try to make it as accurate as you can with what you know, accepting that probably some of this is wrong. And that's perfectly fine. It's the process of trying to think in this way that creates the learning. Another question. As you were doing this, did any of you have sort of questions come up in your mind about like, does this even make sense? Is this really how it's connected? Or, like, could I group it this way? Did anyone, put your hand up if you sort of had some of these questions as you were doing this? Okay, so that's great. So that is now your brain telling you, this is the gap that I need to fill to create a schema. So that is the highest yield thing that your brain right now is ready to catch, right? So if I do this, okay, ready? I'm going to throw this to you, okay? You need to catch, okay? Ready? Why didn't you catch it? Right, yeah, thank you. Sorry for throwing that to you. But yeah, that's the idea, is that your brain is saying, yes, I'm ready. I want to know this. I have a question. This is the gap. You're trying to create a schema. I'm trying to create a schema. There's a gap. I need to cross this. And then if you at that point say, okay, well, page 2 of the book says this, and it's a totally different paragraph, your brain is like, what the hell, dude? Like I was waiting right here, and now you've given it something completely random. You've broken your flow. You're not building a schema anymore. That's kind of fading away. So you will feel this happening. Oh, it's really easy now. Oh, I don't have to think about it anymore. So it feels really easy. It feels really passive. It feels really ineffective, right? So this cycle, what we're doing is we're taking a bunch of ideas. We're seeing how it could connect together. We're forming hypotheses that we're going to change and gain accuracy over time. And then in doing that, we're starting to understand how it might fit together as a big picture. And then we're realizing the gaps in our knowledge. We're seeing the things we need to really look up, that we need to learn a little bit more about. And so we go and do that. And that becomes the next thing we consume. And then we know how to consolidate that. And we work with that. And everything we add on, it opens up the door for other things to be added on. And we continue to do that. And anytime we feel like, oh, it's getting too messy, it's hard to follow, we just pause, we just try to clean it up. Make the lines a little bit clearer, group ideas that can be grouped, simplify a few things. And that is basically the fundamental process of how you can force connections with anything that you can learn. You can use that on a piece of paper, you can do that on an iPad. When you get good enough, you can just do it purely mentally for quite a large amount of content, and you don't even need the notes as an adjunct. So I'm going to give us a little bit more time to practice this because I really, the most important thing is that you really feel what it feels like. Tanzia is also going to just walk around and just have a look at your work, give you a couple little tips here and there if you're getting stuck. If you're also feeling like you're not sure how to move on, you can put your hand up and I'll come help you. But does anyone have any questions about this technique so far, or how they might apply it in different areas? I think it's really important that you have clarity on at least what you're trying to do so that you can really focus on just executing on it.
When you're talking about drawing arrows in certain directions to establish purpose behind the relationship, and do you also label those, what I think of as like edges, to say what the relationship is about or why it's related?
Yeah, good question. You don't have to. You don't have to. So what I found is that when you're creating a map, you're always balancing real estate versus meaning. So you want the map to be as simple as possible with this few things going on, so that when you look at it, you can just see, this is what the knowledge is. And eventually, when you have a big enough thing, your knowledge is going to look quite unique and different. The way you've organized and structured it is going to be different. I can guarantee if you look at your neighbor's maps, they don't look like yours do. And that's normal because the knowledge and the content and the topic is different. And even if the topic is the same, the way you think about it and the way it makes sense for you is going to be different. So what I found is that adding information onto the map to represent what the arrow means is not valuable because you will already remember that in the process of just thinking about what that relationship is and creating the arrow or how big or thick it is, okay? Let's do a little bit more of this, okay? So what I want you to try to do is just remember that cycle, right? So we've got keywords. So what we're going to do is we're going to consume information, right? That consumption is going to come from your keywords. Or if you would like, you can pull out your phone or whatever it is and actually just look it up. You're going to consume information, and then from that, you're going to then map out the connections, very rough, and then you're going to get a sense of when it feels like it's too much. It's too messy. You're getting overwhelmed. Be conscious of that. Keep that in your mind. When you feel like you've hit the limit, it's getting too overwhelming, there's too much going on, we're going to stop, we're going to simplify. We're going to condense that information down, we're going to tidy up the arrows, we're going to rearrange things. So that process of doing your mind map, you're going to do that again and again and again. That's very, very normal. If I'm learning a big complex topic, within 1 hour, I might regenerate my mind map 7 or 8 times, right? And every time you regenerate it, your knowledge is getting better and better, the clarity is improving. So you're going to simplify it. You're going to keep simplifying it until this is no longer true. You're going to simplify it until you can look at it and think, yeah, this makes sense to me now. Feels clear, feels pretty intuitive, not overwhelmed anymore. And then you're going to take in your next round of consumption. You might have questions. If you have questions, look them up. If you don't have any questions, then just add on the next keyword that you think might be meaningful. And you're going to repeat this cycle. Okay? Remember, accuracy here will happen over time. But keep up the pace. Keep your brain active. Don't let it get stuck on making the best perfect group and the best perfect relationship immediately. It will just happen. Keep in flow. If one keyword is just too hard for you to connect, just move on to a different keyword. Eventually, you will figure out where it fits and just keep that pace going. Let's see how that goes. Try it for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're going to go into some further applications of this technique. By the way, I previously did a workshop on this. And I said, okay, I'm just going to give you 15 minutes to do this for like 20 or 25 keywords. And the guy ended up being in flow for an entire hour. And then I stopped him afterwards, and he was like, oh, but it hasn't been 15 minutes yet. So when you really get into this, you will feel that your brain is actually operating at a certain pitch. All right, 5 or 6 minutes, let's go. As I look around, I can see that there are some of you who are struggling to really connect it together. So here's what I do, okay? If you're struggling to connect it together, here's what we're going to do. Take a word and then form a connection. 3, 2, 1. Draw the line, like immediately. Draw it. Just draw it. Draw it now. Draw it. Stop. Draw it. Hurry up. Draw it. Yeah, good. Pick another one. 3, 2, 1. Draw a connection. Do it. Do it. Do it. Yeah. So that pace of just forming connection, a bad schema that's totally wrong in every way is better than no schema at all. It is always easier to build on something that is connected but can be more accurate than to build on nothing. So this is what we were trying to do just now. And especially when you're first starting this, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very conscious, active mental process. That's totally normal. It will get easier over time. Eventually, it will become so instinctive to the way that you process information that you won't be able to really learn any other way. So for me to learn information now, all the stuff that I'm teaching you is very automatic. But obviously, when I was 17 years old, it was super not automatic. So for me to learn how I used to would take me a lot of effort. I really have to concentrate to be able to learn like I used to learn when I was 17, just because those habits are completely gone. So even if it feels difficult, don't worry about that. What I want to know though is whether there's accuracy with technique. So again, we're trying to consume it, then we're mapping it out. So this part, taking ideas and then just getting it into some kind of map. So let's do that test again. This is like not successful, finding it really hard to do it, this side. And this is actually, yeah, like really easy, able to just swiftly just take ideas, start mapping them out, draw relationships, draw connections. How do we feel about your ability to do that part of the process? Okay, so we want to be able to have this part moving fairly quickly. This is just a decision. We just decide to be fast. You can't get accuracy on this. Like the only way to do this badly is to not do it. So this is purely a decision. It's just you keeping the standard in your mind that accuracy from the beginning is not where we need to go. What we need right now is speed, quantity of those relationships. And when it's on paper, you can think about it faster. It's much easier to think about those things than think about it in your head. Your brain is incredibly powerful, but it's not very good at that kind of mental tracking. So this part, we want to keep that relatively fast. You just continue doing that until it feels messy. How many of you, so again, this to this, are we able to detect when it's getting too messy? When it's like a little overwhelming, there's too much going on, I need to pause. Are we able to catch ourselves when this happens? Here to here, how are we feeling about that part? Okay, so this side of the room is like feeling really hard. This side is really easy. Okay, so this just means that as you're learning, you just have a part of your brain that's keeping track of how it feels, right? When it's really, really requiring a lot, when you feel like there's so much, I don't really know what to do, then that's your sign you're entering into overload. You take a pause, and then you simplify, right? And then as we simplify, this is usually the hardest part. We're able to take that overwhelming volume, and we're able to rearrange it, we're able to group it, we can simplify it, we can clean those connections up until we get to a point where it feels like it makes more sense now. How are we feeling about that? This side of the room is really, really hard. This side of the room is very easy. Where are we feeling about that one? Okay, so this one is the one that you get better with practice. You just hold yourself to that standard. So here is where you have to have a high standard. Low standard, just get stuff down, go, 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 getting overwhelmed. High standard, try to simplify it, group it together, piece it together. Here is where the learning happens. This is just preparation for this. And then this part is where we're forming schemas, consolidating information, developing expertise. So the more of your time, if you're spending an hour learning something, if you can spend 45 of those minutes on this and 15 of those minutes on just doing this part, then it means you're going to have a very high efficiency of learning. Dan, I think you were about to have a question, yeah.
Kind of draw it to another analogy. They're kind of like dealing with a really messy cupboard, where your mapping is literally just pulling everything out, dumping it so you can see the lay of the land of what's there. And when there's too much to deal with, that's when you start to group and organize and reorganize and put things back.
Yeah, exactly. The analogy I usually give, and I think this is the perfect analogy for learning, is solving a jigsaw puzzle. When you open up a jigsaw puzzle, it's just pieces. They're individual pieces that you don't know how they connect together, but you know it connects somehow. There is a picture that it forms, but you just don't know what it is. And you don't know that the one you pick up you don't know where it's going to go. And just because you pick it up doesn't mean you know where to place it. So sometimes you pick it up and you just put it back down again because you have no idea where it's meant to go. And so the strategy is get the pieces out and then start arranging and grouping and organizing somehow. Start with the frame, start with the borders, group it by colors, group it by interesting pattern. It doesn't even really matter. But group it somehow. And then slowly, whichever part feels the easiest, like you can form a picture out of, just do it. Because everything you do, that means there are less pieces left in the box for you to deal with. And the more that is forming a picture here, the easier it is to see where it fits. And that piece that you initially picked up that you looked at was extremely random. You have no idea where it goes because it's the same shade of blue as every other piece. You look at that and you realize, oh, this shade of blue has a 1 pixel white dot on it. I know exactly, I've been looking for this pixel white dot, and you know exactly where that fits. That's what it feels like when you're building that knowledge. But what most people do is they pick up a piece and they're like, okay, memorize everything about this piece. Like, ingrain this into my mind. Put it away. Do I remember it? Put it away. What about now? And you pick up the next piece, and you just continue doing that. 6 or 7 pieces later, if your memory is amazing, 8 pieces later, you've forgotten everything. It's overwhelming. And it's insane to expect that your brain could hold on to that with that approach, right? So when you think about like a jigsaw puzzle, it doesn't make sense to use that strategy. And learning is like exactly the same thing. Your brain is undergoing a very, 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 very similar process, right? Yeah, good question. Good analogy. Any other questions or reflections from, what was that?
Are we able to do it again? I was like,
You're in the flow.
oh my God, I have an idea.
You're too deep in the flow. Come back to us, Grace. Go to the light. No, but that's good. Like when you're really getting sucked into it, you can feel that things are flowing. Does anyone have any procedural questions about this? An aspect about an instruction that I gave you that was not clear to you, or that you did it and you felt like, Justin, you said that it was going to be this effective, but when I did it, it felt very different to me. That's important. This should work biologically. I can promise you, I've taught this thousands of times. Every single person I teach this to, it will work. So if you did it and you felt like it didn't work, we can improve that technique. It will 100% work.
With the simplify step, how do you validate that you haven't oversimplified it and just because you've recently done it, it makes sense to you, but tomorrow it doesn't?
It's actually hard to oversimplify. And you usually don't have to worry about that because one part of it is that you can also test yourself on that knowledge later anyway. Yeah. So, this is kind of a good little segue. I'll just really quickly go through this because it's kind of when you think about that learning system. So there is this initial part, which is the consumption. Right? So this is when you're just taking in information. And the next part of it is that processing. So sometimes I call that digestion. But then, it's kind of gross, but it's like there's like a regurgitation aspect of this as well. But I'm just going to call it testing. Every time you eat too much and you vomit, you'll be like, I'm just testing my food. Oh, yep, still there. So this is kind of the overall flow. So every learning system should have these components. Now, normally the consumption part is not an issue. So what you need to get right with this is that your consumption and digestion are balanced. That's the key part, is that these two things need to be balanced. So anytime you enter into a process where the consumption is too high compared to your ability to digest, and that is skill dependent and knowledge dependent, like the more you know about a topic, the more you can consume until you get overloaded, right? Whereas a brand new subject, a very small amount can overload you straight away. So most people grossly overestimate the amount that they can consume, right? They're horrible overeaters. So you consume while keeping in mind your ability to digest it. That digestion is this process. This is consumption, digestion, consumption, digestion. So the digestion part, the way to do this correctly is making sure that you use the techniques that I just taught you to simplify. And again, those techniques are just the base. You can then evolve those many, many levels beyond what I've taught you to increase efficiency. But keeping good fidelity of that technique here. And then the testing part is saying, even if you do this perfectly, your brain will always win in that you will forget things and your knowledge will have gaps. It's inevitable. Right? There's no way to avoid it. So we need to make sure that we are testing ourselves on that knowledge in some way. Now, there's a spectrum of testing. There's very formal testing, which is actually having questions for yourself to test, creating flashcards for yourself, doing a quiz. That's a very structured type of test. But there are also types of tests that are very organic, or how I call it, there's a win-win type of testing, especially in a professional setting. So let's say you learn about a new type of technology that you can apply for your work. It's going to help you solve a lot of different problems. And you've digested it and you really understand it. Now you need to test it. So you might, the next day, call a meeting with a few of your team and then say, hey, I learned this really interesting thing. I'm going to teach it to you because I feel like all of us should understand this. So that teaching opportunity for you is not only great for your team, it's you testing your own knowledge, right? So you've created a testing situation for yourself that's beneficial for developing your expertise, while at the same time creating benefit for other people as well. Because probably you teaching it to them after having digested it really well is actually going to make more sense than them trying to learn it by themselves, especially if they're untrained in this stuff. You can also test it just by the natural work that you're doing. There are probably decisions that you're making, problems that you're solving on an everyday basis that is the reason why you are learning this in the first place. So you can think about the natural things that you need to do as part of your work and say, okay, this is me testing myself. If it's not enough, you can ask, like, how can I test myself even more? Like, how can I increase that opportunity? Or if there are little gaps, how can I fill those gaps? So you might be doing a lot of high-level planning, but you're not really using a lot of that small, technical, detailed information on a daily basis. Cool. So just focus your testing on the little detailed parts that would normally slip through the cracks. And that's where you could use little things like, flashcards or whatever little other technique that you want to use. But every learning system should be composed of balanced consumption, accurate digestion, and comprehensive testing. Whether this is happening naturally as part of your work or as part of a conscious effort too. So you can look at your own ability to perform with knowledge and then ask yourself where the biggest bottleneck is. If you are feeling like you're overwhelmed with too much information all the time, then this is too high. Or this is too low or low quality. 99% of people, that's it. That's where bang for buck is going to be. And this is the thing that takes a long time to get good at. If you feel like you're getting to a really good level of understanding, you've got that expertise, you've developed it, like you are good with that knowledge, but then when it comes to actually performing with that knowledge, for some reason, you're not able to recall it as well as you wanted to recall it, there are little gaps that you're discovering later down the line, you need to up your testing. And then you up your testing and then you realize where your next bottleneck is. It's actually very simple. So when I coach any type of learning, whether they're a student or a working professional with decades of experience, all I have to do is just ask them a series of questions. Where are you finding the problem? Where's your current barrier? And that tells me very accurately where to focus in on, right? But again, for most people, it's just going to be about balancing. So there's a couple more things I want to talk about, which is just ways of applying this technique in slightly different ways. But I'm wondering, would it be helpful for you guys for me to do a demonstration of the technique that I just showed you? I can just learn any topic you want me to learn on the spot, and I just show you how I do it, if it would help you to get a sense for it. Yep, I'm seeing some nods. So if you just give me a topic, and then I'll just show you what I do.
What about LLMs like ChatGPT?
Yeah, we can go through. I have been studying it a little bit, but usually because I do tend to do things for accountants a lot of the times, anything to do with accounting, I'm just like pretty bad at.
I had GST.
Great, I hate it. Let's learn about it. Okay, so what about GST? So give me the words to start with. GST.
So,
Yeah, give me the words.
Stands for?
No. Yeah, yeah. I do know enough to know what it stands for.
So I had here taxable supply.
Okay. Yep. Keep going.
GST credits.
Credits.
GST free items.
Okay. Yep.
Then there's what it applies to, like motor vehicles.
So application, can I call that?
Yeah.
Applications? Okay.
Then you got like ATO,
Yeah.
companies,
Yep.
business owners,
Okay.
and then just like taxpayers.
Okay. Okay. Let's get two more.
Say cash flow. And,
Okay.
like payment plans.
Okay. Let's just say payment plans here. Okay, so that's just my very rough map of like random ideas as you were speaking. That is kind of like, I don't know if it's right, but don't really care. So there's a couple things that for me stick out because I actually don't know what taxable supply means. So what does that mean?
So it's a good that you'd have to pay tax on.
Okay, so it's like eligible, like something that you would have to. Okay, so I'm seeing that there's a link between taxable supply and GST free. Is that the case? Is there a link between? So if something is GST free, does that mean that it is not something that's taxable supply?
Yeah, that's right.
Basically, okay.
Like the opposite.
Right. Okay. So that I can see could connect into here. So this and this are going to be connected together. And I think that's really kind of talking about
eligibility is really the word that I'm looking for there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have something that's called eligibility. And then from here, there's going to be free versus taxable supply.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does cash flow fit into this? Why is that? How is that related to this situation?
So I think because when I'm explaining this to clients, they don't understand it themselves, and what happens is they end up spending the money that they should have actually given to the ATO.
I see.
And then because they're actually meant to hold 10%
Right.
of what they're selling.
Right. So this cash flow part is relevant because it's about how the business themselves actually manages
Yeah.
their own finances in order to meet their GST obligations, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So actually, it's like kind of GST applies to certain things. Like credits. Tell me about credits.
Credits, they get back GST credits on things that they've bought that
Okay.
has GST on.
Right. Okay. So this applies part is probably this eligibility. So that's kind of the same thing. So this and this probably should be here.
Yeah.
Free versus taxable supply. And then when you spend it, you're going to get these credits. But actually, there's a part that's kind of bigger here, which is kind of about your finance management, I think.
Yeah.
And then this is actually about your cash flow management, as well as the credits that you can have. And when you do it, you have to pay it back to the ATO, which is here. And probably you can pay that with a payment plan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this I can get rid of on this side. Okay, I don't need this anymore. So I rearrange that. What does that say? Taxpayers. Oh, what does taxpayers have to do with this?
So that's just us, like as consumers. So
Yeah.
because the overall tax is meant to get passed down to the consumer.
Right, so it's like you give it to the ATO and then that's going to go.
So the taxpayer pays.
Right,
like
okay.
the good. Like
Yeah.
they're pretty much buying it from the business,
Right, okay.
and then
So,
the business is meant to hold it and give it to the ATO.
yeah, so I see. So I feel like in my mind there's some kind of business versus payer kind of balance here. So I almost wonder if it's actually worth having something that's kind of like, GST. So I almost wonder if there's actually an element of like the business versus the payer,
Yeah, consumer, yeah, I guess.
and whether that then connects with something else again, because obviously business connects with the finance management part here. So maybe what I would do is I'd rearrange this. So instead of being up here, I actually swing it down so it's down here. It'd be easier to connect it later. But then this payer thing, like, is there much more to do with this, or is this literally going to be the only key word? Because if it is, then I don't need this to be its own whole new concept. I can try to chuck it somewhere else, So these are the types of thoughts that I'm having in terms of how to arrange it. But do you sort of see how it's starting to take a certain type of shape, right? I mean, you may not all be thrilled about GST, probably no more thrilled than I am. But, compared to starting with this and getting to this, where I can look at this, and even if it's not completely correct, I can look at this and feel like, yep, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's fairly intuitive. I feel very logical. I'm fairly confident that if I rub that out, I can reproduce like 90% of that from memory without really having to spend too much effort. And that took all of what, 3 minutes, to do that, right? So it's not technically difficult. It's just that I'm not letting myself get stuck in just, oh, what is this? What is this? I'm just saying, oh, it might be this, it might be connected here, or maybe that's here. And I'm just looking for opportunities I can simplify and group it.
So you sort of keep moving on the go.
I'm just keeping moving. So that pace that I was doing right now, it's a little bit faster because I can just ask a question and you tell me straight away. But honestly, like these days, you just ask ChatGPT and it gives you the answer. Is basically the same, right? So that is this process of exactly what I did. This is exactly what I would just do when I'm learning something, right? And you can just keep doing this. Like 50, 100 keywords later, you can just keep doing it, and all that happens is that your map gets denser and more intricate, and there's more structures and layers that are added on top of it. And then you should feel that as you are learning more and more, it's getting easier and easier and easier because you're getting more and more anchor points. If you feel like you're learning more and more and you're getting more overwhelmed, it means that your consumption is too high compared to your digestion part. Okay? Did anyone have any questions about the way that I was just doing that? Any differences to how you were doing that? Any questions you want to ask about this? Feeling pretty confident. Did you have a question?
I was just going to say, like, I'm assuming this is just one tool. Like, you couldn't have read your 200 pages before and done this on the fly and memorized it just like that. Right?
Actually, for just that book, I did.
You did?
Yeah. So it's this is probably powerful enough that, if you just learn to do this really well, it could be that this alone is enough for you to surpass every learning-related challenge you'll ever have. So it scales quite high with your level of skill. There are other techniques that you can add on
little adjuncts, and especially once you start getting to that diminishing return point where your skill level is really good, there are tiny, tiny little optimizations depending on the context and the type of knowledge and the way you need to use it that makes little 1-2% adjustments. And those things do stack up. You know, you can get a lot of improvement just through that. But most people just getting that, you know, high yield improvement of just learning to do this like bread and butter is going to be a complete life changer in how they can process information. I mean, if you're sitting there in a meeting and you're learning something for the first time, talking to a client, you know, whatever it is, and you're just sitting there and they're talking to you and you're just like collecting information and mapping it out, and you're like, okay, yeah, I have 6 questions that I need to ask you. And then the questions you ask are just so targeted and so pertinent. It just shows you exactly that you know how to think about it. That is, first of all, very impressive. That creates a lot of trust in the person. They know that you are thinking deeply about it. And it means that you walk away from that with usable knowledge, not just, damn, I need to spend an hour later going over my notes to figure out what just happened. Yeah.
I have a question about, I mean, this is obviously fantastic for kind of building relational knowledge. How do you approach it when you get to the point where you're reaching like discrete facts?
Very technical, very detailed stuff. Yeah, good question. So there's 2 things about that. The first thing is that most of the things that we think we have to memorize because they're so disconnected and discrete, it's just that we haven't found the connection for it. And so I always say that don't make the judgment on whether it needs to be memorized or whether it can be connected based on how you feel about it when you first interact with it. When you have that jigsaw piece and you first pull it up, every single piece feels disconnected. But some of those, like at least half of those, you will be able to look it up, look at it, and then it will connect. So it could just be that it's only discrete and irrelevant for you at your current point of learning. Have you done a PhD or? No. Have you done you've done research? Yeah. You're published, right? So like when you do research and you're doing some kind of like literature review, you gain very deep knowledge about this singular thing that probably no one else really cares about, you know, and you become really passionate about this one tiny little thing. Those little discrete facts are relevant for you. So when someone tells you, hey, there's been this new solution that's come out that changes the chemical composition of this one little thing by like a tiny little fraction, no one else cares, no one else sees why that's relevant. But when you look at it, you think, oh, wow, that's significant, because that means that instead of doing it in this process, I could actually change it to do this process. Like, you know, that might mean, you know, you can see those implications. And that's just because you have the relevant anchor points. So the first thing is try to build the anchor points, and then after you've done your best attempt at really connecting it together, then see what's left. Those are the true discrete details where either it's so far from what you need to know that to get there would just take way too long, or it truly is a very irrelevant detail that you need to know purely probably because you're going to get assessed on it. And for those details, smash them into flashcards.
And then a question about bullet points a bit earlier.
Was this a question about when you're reading like a book and you're? Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'll get into that. So, the question that Ben had, and this is like such a common situation to find yourself in, is that when you are taking in information, it's coming at you linearly. Obviously, when I say create a list of keywords, you know, it's all omnidirectional. You can start anywhere. But when you're reading a book, there's a beginning and an end. So this is related to a topic that I call order control. It's a method called order control. It basically says that you take control of the order in which you learn it. So you can be reading a book. There's a couple things that you could do. You could, for example, just skim through the book, collect the keywords very quickly. You could say, hey, I'm about to read this book and tell ChatGPT to generate you the most important keywords for it. That would also be perfectly viable. That is actually like that very technique, just using ChatGPT or LLMs to just generate keywords for you to kickstart your learning, is probably one of the single biggest time saves that an LLM can do for you in generating expertise. Because that process of just getting keywords does very, very little for your learning. There's not really much engagement. There's not meaningful schema connection happening there. It's just preparation. So if you can cut that down to 5 seconds, good. You should do that. As long as you're not using it for the schema part, the forming and the simplifying part. That's the part you need to do yourself. So yeah, you can just go through and then pick through what the keywords are. Or if it's small enough, so let's say it's not like a 300-400 page book, but it's kind of like a 30-40 page report, right? And you feel like, okay, there's a discrete amount of information here. You can just try to do what I sort of did here, where as Anthony was giving me each point, I was actually just kind of making like my little map as I went, and then just work on your map directly, if it's a small enough cluster of keywords. Yeah, and you can just make that judgment yourself. Okay, there was a question, but she's gone now. But it was about sort of applying this for different contexts. Like if you've got an assignment that you need to do, especially if you need to do some kind of writing. So this is a technique that fundamentally just helps you to organize your thoughts. It gives your thoughts structure. It tells your brain how to think about this topic. So the application of this is any time you need to have organized thinking. You need to create a plan for something. You need to do a solution design. You need to make a high-stakes decision. You need to fully understand a client's problems very, very deeply. You need to learn a difficult concept. You need to go through a new research article. You need to understand a brand new library or new technology that's come out. It's fine. Every single situation of those, especially writing. You need to write a report. You need to write something in a way that's very compelling. If you need to organize your thoughts, start with this. Just write down the keywords of everything that you need to include. Map it out till you get to a point where it feels intuitive to you. And when it's intuitive to you, the expression of that knowledge is actually the easy part. It's just a matter of how you want to express it. And then that is when you become a true expert. An expert is able to use that information very fluidly. You can say, hey, okay, this is the way that I'm thinking about the topic. Here's how it all makes sense. Here's the lay of the land. You can present it to a client. You can present it to a stakeholder. You can present it to yourself. And they might say, okay, well, yeah, I don't know about this part, but what about this? Have you thought about this thing? And then you can say, oh, okay, well, in that case, you just move this here, and we'll change this out. So it gives you that fluidity of knowledge. And you can develop it very, very quickly. And I do want to make it clear that right now, for the purposes of the workshop, we only use 10, 15, 20 keywords. But as you continue learning, this list will just grow. So you can get really into very detailed technical stuff here. It's just that the map would grow. And you can end up with 200, 300 keywords, no problem.
Do you find that there's an upper limit of how big a map like this would be useful, or is it just as far as you go?
Yeah, no, actually the answer is yes. There is kind of an upper limit. I found that when you think about a topic, the topic is probably the bounds. Because the reason we call it a topic is because we understand that there are certain connections within that and relationships that mean they're relevant to each other, as opposed to another topic where there's like a clear enough separation. So, for example, if I'm studying from like a textbook, there might be 1 or 2 chapters covering a topic. So that would be the bounds for how I want to do it. And I've had people say, like, I've got my entire medical textbook. Can I just learn all of it through a single mind map? It's like you theoretically could, but you're going to reach such a overwhelming amount of information all trying to be condensed into a single map that's probably beyond like a biological human limit of what your brain can actually process. And so you just arbitrarily make the decision to keep it small. But pro tip here is bite off more than you think you could chew initially. And originally you may feel that you can only learn like this amount and connect it together, but that's because you're probably not used to thinking in this way. You should be able to cover essentially an entire topic 4, 5, 6 times more than you normally would be able to, and make it make sense if you do this. Yeah. The problem is if you take too small of a bite, there's actually not enough connections in there for you to find meaningful patterns in. So you don't get the full advantage of it. Okay. We are a little over time though, but thanks everyone for your engagement. If you have any other questions or things, we'll also be sending out an email afterwards. We'll have a little survey in there, just get your thoughts, a little bit of feedback as well, just understand how the workshop's been for you. So if you can respond to that, that'd be really appreciated. But you can also just reply back if you've got any questions about things, you're applying this yourself and you're trying to use it. Happy to help as well. Okay. Thank you, everyone.